Well, hi everybody, and we're moving forward. We've just had quite a weekend here back in 2020. If it is back in 2020 for you, the solstice and many political developments, which hopefully will see or help to see the United States win its battle for democracy, as that particular battle will be fought out in the United States, we've been told. All right. Now we go on with a new section. It's called the effects of externalization. It's just a few months before Alice Bailey passed over in Sagittarius, that is in December of 1949. So I imagine she was really trying to respond to the Tibetan and make sure that the things that he wanted to have completed were completed. Okay. In my previous instruction, he says, upon this theme, I dealt with the various energies which would be brought into activity or utilized when the masters emerged from the silence in which they have guarded themselves for so many thousands of years. And I think there has been a guarding of themselves in a way ever since let's see here. Yeah, okay. I've got two keyboards going here, two keyboards to try to solve the E problem, you know. I don't have time to give my computer in for repair. It appears to be working. So since the Atlantean War, they withdrew, but that's millions of years, not thousands. So let's see what the Tibetan means. The point to be grasped is that the energies with which I dealt will be used in a new and more vital manner. These energies are ever present and ever active, but they swing into activity sequentially and under law and order. Well, we don't know yet the science of cycles, not yet. We know a little, perhaps, but not a lot. Just that they are in sequence, yes, and they swing in under law and order. They are vitally and energetically in the needed program which the plans of the hierarchy may entail in a particular cycle. So the masters already have that particular city, which is called all knowledge. It's not really all knowledge, but it is, as far as maybe the Brahmic aspect of the cosmic physical plane, it is all knowledge. These energies bring about what we idly call the events of the day. We don't give it much thought, is what he's saying. They condition our passing civilizations and are so much a part of the world in which we live and move and have our being that events, as expressions of directed energies, mean little to us, except insofar as they may affect adversely our personalities. They connote simply a way of life in any specific time. Well, if one is an astrologer or a rheologist, I suppose the events mean more. One studies these things. These energies were started on their activities in the very night of time. It's a vague phrase, very poetic. It's hard to know exactly what is meant there, but perhaps from the time the planetary logos's demonstration appeared on the cosmic physical plane, and maybe even earlier. These energies were started on their activities in the very night of time. They established, each of them, their needed cyclic rhythm. They are responsible for the activity of substance on matter. Now, that's a very important statement because substance substands matter and acts upon it and directs it. It is beneath it, as it were, and causative. Okay. So they are responsible for the activity of substance on matter, or of the action of the vital or etheric body upon matter. And there, in general, is a way to look at substance so that any more subtle plane is substantial to the grosser plane immediately below it, and actually to other planes below it. I mean, we might say that the monadic plane is substantial to the atmic plane, but also substantial to all the 5 planes of Brahma: atmic, buddhic, manasic, emotional, etheric, physical, on the cosmic physical plane. But usually, when we talk about substance, it is usually etheric in nature. They are the lowest formulated expression of the creative intelligence. In other words, they are principled, whereas dense matter is not with respect to this solar system. They are the lowest formulated expression of the creative intelligence, embodying the principle of life or livingness, because they essentially are life itself. Where they vitalize, they animate, and life in action. So substantial energies. Maybe we can put this here. Okay. Feels so good to be able to use the second keyboard. They both work now, except my Buddhic E is wanting. It's a yellow note, and Mercurian, and has been stubborn of late. Forget not that dense matter is not a principle. It is only that which is responsive to the creative principle. In this case, okay, so in this case, we mean the ethers. When, however, the externalization of the hierarchy begins to take place, and it will be spread over quite a long period of time, which is, maybe something we tend to forget. It's the 5 ashrams of the 5 masters just recently discussed deal with the initial phases of the externalization, whether they are actually externalized themselves or whether they cause externalization. Okay, so over quite a long time, over quite a long period of time, the impact of these substantial energies on matter will be radically altered because they will be, for the first time in history, directed from etheric levels, from the etheric body of the planet in the three worlds. So there are some new developments occurring. And we've been told, I think, in Esoteric Psychology 1 that there are changes in the ethers which are going to make them more noticeable, more observable, let us say. And that will be important for redesigning our view of what reality is and the multiple layers of vibration on the cosmic physical plane, which now are not given much attention, or maybe considered to be fallacious altogether. Hitherto, these energies have been directed from the Buddhic plane, which is the lowest of the cosmic etheric levels. It is etheric in the cosmic sense. Fundamentally, the direction will still be from the Buddhic plane, but the detailed and focused direction will be given from within the three worlds and upon the physical plane. This will be the task of the externalized ashrams, organized to function openly. So the impact on matter is much closer to the matter itself, or at least the direction of matter, though originating on the Buddhic plane, is closer to the matter that has to be directed. And this puts it more in the range of possibility for man as a director and an allocator of physical energies. So the detailed, let's look at this. So the detailed and focused direction will be given from within the three worlds upon the physical plane and upon the physical plane. And especially it appears from the etheric plane, which will be the next plane of mastery for humanity. I mean, already with Kirlian photography and other maybe electrical methods of detection, the idea of a bioelectric field has emerged pretty solidly in the minds of those who are progressive in the scientific field. It was the knowledge of this important development, it was the knowledge that this important development was imminent, which made the hierarchy in the last century widen the area or scope of its teaching activity, and thus bring to the consciousness of modern man the knowledge of what occultism essentially means. Okay. So that this was imminent caused hierarchy to change the scope of its teaching. So the keynotes upon which occult philosophy is built, what are these keynotes? Always there are lists, you know, and these lists need acknowledgement. There is naught in manifestation except organized energy, Of course, that is in manifestation. There is more to life and reality than that which is in manifestation. Nevertheless, that's what we're concerned with. Energy follows or conforms itself to thought. So thought is the great directing something behind the organization of energy, behind the creation of form, behind the organization of matter. The occultist works in energy and with energies. And of course, this basically means that people are being prepared to become occultists. At least we are students of occultism right now. We cannot talk of ourselves as if we were yet occultists. Maybe those deeply upon the fifth ray, working with the very structure of matter, are even closer than those of us who are not on that fifth ray. The thought of God brought the universe of energies into organized form upon the highest of the seven planes, or upon the first cosmic etheric plane. This is important. The thought of God, God, the planetary logos, God, Sanat Kumara, not the universal God, but maybe you can extrapolate to that point as well. The thought of God brought the universe of energies into organized form upon the highest of the seven planes, or upon the first cosmic etheric level. You may recall that DK talks about the structures to be found in Shambhala. In the Sea of Fire, there is organization, and there are forms which are archetypal, produced by logoic thought, and they eventually force conformity to their structure in the planes below. If I would be successful in finding this other point, I might be successful. Let's see. This is the AAB what? AAB extracts. And if I look up the word Shambhala, Shambhala and streams of energy, I might find something. Yes, maybe energy's impression. And maybe not. I mean, there's a lot of things here, and I know you're not looking at it. Here it is. So this will confirm something for us about Shambhala. It is a world of pure energy, of light, and of directed force. See, we have very small conception of what Shambhala really is, but this from Discipleship of the New Age, Volume 2 is a good one. It can be seen as streams and centers of force, all forming a pattern of consummate beauty, all potentially invocative of the world of the soul and of the world of phenomena, In other words, it can call forth a response from the world of soul and of phenomena. It therefore constitutes, in a very real sense, the world of causes and of initiation. It certainly gets things started. So that fits, I think, quite well with the idea of the thought of God working within Shambhala and giving us a little description of what Shambhala is. So there is organized form. There is organized form upon the highest of the seven planes, because sometimes if we were to think of the sea of fire, we might get some kind of picture of chaotic flame. And it's much more than that. But of course, we're not in any position to see directly what it is. We just have something from DK about it. So let's just say this, that Shambhala is organized. These energies have for untold eons been directed from the fourth or lowest of the cosmic etheric planes, the plane which we call the Buddhic and regard as the first definitely spiritual plane, if we're counting from below, in our usually erroneous thought. Well, we do what we can until we know better. This direction has been under impression from Shambhala, so from Shambhala to Buddhi to the lower planes. And the masters have manipulated these energies in conformity with the plan, which is the blueprint of the purpose. Okay. So, those are etheric energies which are being manipulated by the masters. And I like very much this idea that the plan is the blueprint of the purpose. Now, maybe, in these computer days, we don't use blueprints anymore. We have, and it's been around a long time, computer-assisted design. We have something different than a tangible paper diagram. But let's just say that etheric energies are causal and substantial to the dense physical energies, and they have been manipulated by the masters according to the archetypes found within the cosmic ethers. Upon the Buddhic plane, there are archetypes too, but they are reflecting the final etheric archetype for the cosmic physical plane. They are reflecting the logoic plane, where the highest aspect of Shambhala, at least on the cosmic physical plane, is found. Okay. In the great approach of the hierarchy to humanity and its imminent appearance upon the physical plane, the center of direction will also necessarily approach still nearer. And as a result of the future hierarchical manifestation, centers of energy direction will be found wherever the ashram of a master is located in any part of the world. So this will be on, it will be on the physical plane, but those physical centers, such as will be found in various planetary centers, will also have their etheric component from which energy direction can occur, and occur in a very, specific way under the immediate direction of the master. The center of direction will not simply be that of the Buddhic plane, It will be definitely etheric and have an immediate physical effect. So the center of direction will also approach still nearer. And as a result of this, physical hierarchical manifestation, centers of energy direction will be found wherever the ashram of a master is located in any part of the world. We're pretty well told that the masters have to come out first, certain of them, and that their ashrams have to be, or at least concentrations of their influence will be found in the 5 planetary centers. And I imagine especially the ones that are more organized at this time, maybe let's say New York, London, Geneva. There's still a lot of organization to be done in Darjeeling, and it's very esoteric, very removed in a way, and yet extremely powerful. Since Tokyo is involved with the materialistic aspect of the first ray, precipitation onto the physical plane may be rapid. Okay, so anyway, centers of energy direction will be found wherever the ashram of a master is located in any part of the world. We pretty well know that New York will be one of those places because Master DK was even attempting to do that in a small way with the ashramic group and the 14 rules and Alice Bailey's guidance of that in residence group, at least close enough to show up every month for these meetings, which would instruct them regarding the ashram, since Alice Bailey was a definite conscious member of the ashram. So anyway, this is a statement of profound significance. It is an indication of hierarchical policy and the mode whereby science, working as it does with energies, can be brought into cooperative association and relation with an ashram upon the physical plane, knowing it for what it is. So this is an entirely new departure. Well, science is becoming more etherically focused all the time. When there was the breaking forth of the atomic explosions, in all their horror, in one way, DK said a death blow against materialism had been struck. It does seem that Japan has some karma regarding radiation. I was just thinking of the recent Fukushima disaster due to tsunamis and how that, in this case, polluted with radiation a significant section of the country. It's the only country thus far, and hopefully, well, what can I say? It's the only country thus far which has experienced the explosion, deliberate destructive explosion of the atomic bomb. There were tests carried out in different places. So those are explosions, but not aimed at the deliberate destruction of any particular group. So anyway, the possibility of directing energies on the physical plane from the etheric plane has become more and more possible. And as the ethers are discovered to be real, they were dismissed, of course, toward the end of the 19th century. No need for them, apparently, in the eyes of many physicists of the time, but they will return, probably defined in a new way. Probably that definition is already with us. The next body of divine demonstration or sphere of divine demonstration are the ethers, and they are on their way into recognition. All right. Earlier, I stated that the physical plane areas or localities which constitute the present modern, what? Oh, I don't know if this is incorrectly copied. Earlier, I stated that the physical plane areas or localities which constitute the present modern something, exits, present modern, yes, exits. Okay, I thought I saw the word exist. Present modern exits for energies through which direct energies can carry, directed energies can pass to carry out the creative process are 5 in number. New York, London, Geneva. No, he's going from the, he's going from the west towards the east. Darjeeling, Tokyo. These 5 form a 5-pointed star of interlocking energies, symbolic of the major divisions of our modern civilization. I would have you, okay. So, that's, as we have been saying, these 5, not all of them equally awakened, are the exits for energies present modern. Now, at other times and in the past, such centers may have been other than they are now. Present modern exits for energies through which directed energies can pass to carry out the creative process. That's what these 5 are. I would have you bear in mind that all that I am here giving you in that energy is the relation to the human kingdom and to nothing else. I am not relating these energies to the other kingdoms in nature. He's implying that they could be. I am here concerned with physical plane utilization of energy through the power of directed thinking and on behalf of the evolution and well-being of mankind. And basically, this is what hierarchy does. So he limits the scope so we do not jump to conclusions which are unwarranted. I'm just giving you information on energy in relation to the human kingdom and to nothing else, and not the other kingdoms of nature. I'm here concerned with the physical plane utilization of energy through the power of directed thinking and on behalf of evolution and the well-being of mankind, which is, of course, the hierarchical goal, to direct these energies, at least those masters that are specifically attuned to the human kingdom, because at this time it is so important that that particular intermediary kingdom get properly aligned with the divine plan, which thus far it is not. At each one of these 5 centers, one of the masters will be found present with his ashram, and a vortex of spiritual forces will there be organized to hasten and materialize the plans for the Christ for the new and coming world cycle. I do wonder, what Master DK's connection is with New York. but maybe see, because there are three first ray centers, one sixth ray and one second ray center. Now, does that mean that the masters there to be found will be precisely on those rays? I don't know. I mean, New York is the center for the Americas. The Americas have soft line soul rays, it appears. At least, let's say, the United States and Canada probably have the second ray. There's a lot of sixth ray in South America. Brazil has the fourth ray. These are pretty much on the 2-4-6 line. So, it makes sense that a master on the 2-4-6 line would have establish some kind of headquarters there. And it may be, as I've suggested, that the Christ eventually, but who can say, will establish his headquarters near the United Nations complex, perhaps in New York, a second ray city, second soul ray. Well, these things will be established on the basis of what humanity does. And, we may find that things work out in a much different way than we might at this time anticipate. So, one of the important things is for us to know what is our business and what is not our business. Because, if we get into things that are not our business, we're liable to make erroneous judgments which will mislead others. Of course, probably we can't help that because of the limitations of our mental faculties. But at least we can, if we don't want to sink in the quicksand, maybe we stay out of the swamp. The organizing of these 5 centers will be done slowly and gradually. A senior disciple will appear and will work quietly at the foundation work, gathering around him the needed agents, aspirants, and assistants. I think this is important because sometimes we imagine a rather dramatic, sudden appearance of masters and their initiates, when in fact the slow way, careful way is operating. And we do recall that should the Buddha cease his yearly visit to the Waisak Valley, that there will be an agent, a representative in every country that will receive direct impression from him. So, and that agent, will probably be an initiate of some kind, whether over the threshold or, maybe probably beyond. And what are disciples anyway? I mean, they, simply because you're initiate does not mean that you are not a disciple. So here we have, the possibility of a senior disciple appearing. If it's a senior disciple, is it an initiate? It would seem necessary, but sometimes the term senior disciple is used to indicate simply someone who has taken the second degree and is close to taking the third degree. But there will be a magnetic process at work here and a buildup. And it will not go on with a lot of hoopla, because that almost guarantees failure. All these workers at any particular center will be trained to think. And the effort now present in the educational and social world to force men to think for themselves is a general part of this training process. Until a man can do his own thinking and deciding, he cannot be an intelligent, willing, and understanding cooperator working with the ashram and controlling and directing the creative process. Okay, so basically, let's just call it learning to think is necessary. It's such a relief to type the letter E without having to fool around for 30 seconds before one of them appears. Well, thus our dependence on technology. So, being taught to think in order to be useful to the hierarchy, independent thinking, not just a childlike waiting for direction. And oftentimes what appears is an authoritarian demagogic personality that's all too ready to direct those who are unthinking. We have that now, and we had that in Nazism. At that particular time, the thinkers were driven out, and the fervent believers triumphed. And it wasn't really their triumph, those who were directing them triumphed. If the new heavens and the new earth are to be a fact in manifestation and in reality, it means a great recreating process must get underway. And this is the concept lying behind the teaching anent the 5 centers on earth and the part which they will play in rebuilding and reorganizing the world. Well, it's it's part of the main teaching of occultism, and it's little suspected by those who are not part of receiving the occult lore. The new heavens and new earth. Well, maybe we understand what the new earth may be, but there are changes going on in the heavens as well. And let's just say the masters of the wisdom work within the heavens, and there is reorganization going on there. And a kind of renewal and extension of power, because Shambhala is coming in so much closer relationship to the hierarchy. As the next few years bring into focus the hierarchical intention, disciples and aspirants must look for those men and women, of course, and those few women, he says. Now it's much more, and who will be working as a group along spiritual lines in or near one of the 5 localities. So maybe the Tibetan tried to set an example of that when he was getting his ashramic group together with Alice Bailey for a study at the time of around the full moon. I think there's been, what we're seeing now is a tremendous leadership emerging among women. It's a good thing too. I was thinking about this epidemic, which may be old hat by the time you get to this point in your reading or listening, if you get here. But it's those countries that have been directed by women that have weathered the storm more successfully. Certainly New Zealand and Finland has a prime minister and quite a number of women in directorial physicians, there are probably others. They tend to be more cautious, more reasonable, and maybe in general less compromised by the lower ego. Okay, so initial opposition to the founding of these centers of clear thinking in men and women, working freely and understandingly with one of the masters or senior initiates, maybe, what is the senior initiate of the fourth degree, is already unhappily present. It is to be found in the narrowness, the biased information, and the lack of freedom of the totalitarian schools of thought. This was inevitable, for the Black Lodge ever endeavors to parallel, offset, and undo. If you parallel, you mislead, right? So giving people a choice and plunging them into uncertainty and lying to make the parallel or your part of it seem more attractive. This was inevitable, for the Black Lodge ever endeavors to parallel, offset, and undo the work of the White Lodge, and hitherto quite successfully. But the cycle of success is slowly closing, because the energy of goodwill emanated by the will to good is rapidly becoming effective. Well, nothing of value is accomplished with real immediate ease. And there are ways, in which the Black Lodge attacks the founding disciples or the advanced guard put in place to hold the center and attract the necessary workers. So we need to expand the minds of people so they are not caught in narrowness. We need to detect what is a lie and what is truth, so that biased information is not accentuated and the truth subdued, and the lack of freedom of the totalitarian schools of thought, which, can be as much religious as political. In London, in New York, in Geneva, and Darjeeling, and in Tokyo, a master will eventually be found, organizing a major energy center. At the same time, his ashram will continue to function upon Buddhic levels, which is interesting because, the majority are there, and especially second ray ashrams, and maybe some on the Atmic plane in the first ray, or demonstrating the first ray. Does it mean that first ray ashrams cannot organize on the Buddhic level? I wouldn't think so. For the entire personnel has not been alerted for externalization. In other words, some will still remain on the Buddhic level, directing affairs from that higher vantage point, but some have been tapped for externalization, we might say. So a master will be found in these 5 planetary centers. And since it takes a while for all this to occur, as I said, probably in certain more organized planetary centers sooner than in the others. The ashram will therefore be working on 2 levels, and yet that is not a correct statement of fact, as there are no levels, as well you know, but only states of consciousness. So, we have organization of certain externalizing ashrams in the initial phases. A first ray ashram, second ray, third ray, fifth ray, seventh ray, 3 sub 7, 1, 2, 5, 3, and another second ray ashram, master decays. So if some of these, it seems to give the hint that some of these are functioning on Buddhic levels, regardless of what their ray may be. In a way, the entire ashram known as the hierarchy moved from off the higher mental plane onto the Buddhic plane, except for some maybe ashrams run by arhats of a scientific mental type, and maybe certain very powerful ashrams connected with Atma. But it seems that ashrams on various rays did move to the Buddhic plane around the year 1925. So the ashram will therefore be working on 2 levels. And yet this is not a correct statement of fact, as there are no levels, as well but only states of consciousness. But maybe they will have facility with both states of consciousness, and some of them working more with one particular type of energy focus and others more with the energy focus closer to the physical plane, and both will be very cooperative with each other. The methods, they have to be beyond us at the moment. So DK says, ask me not how this can be. Ponder on the relation of this dual and simultaneous appearance by attempting to grasp the nature of the manifested form of the planetary logos in the person of Sanat Kumara. Sometimes he's considered to be an extension of the planetary logos, an emanation, or the planetary logos himself in extension and emanation. Sanat Kumara is not the personality of the planetary logos. For personality, as you understand it, is not existent in his case. It is not the soul of the planetary logos, because the soul is the anima mundi and the soul of all forms in all kingdoms. Sanat Kumara, the eternal youth, can be seen by those who have the right, presiding, for instance, over the council in Shambhala. So it seems that one would pretty well have to be a Chohan of the 6th degree, yet at the same time he is present as the life and informing intelligence upon and within our planet. So, DK says, don't ask me, and yet he's giving a hint which, if pondered upon, will allow us to understand more. We have multi-leveled consciousness potential within us, and we can function simultaneously through a number of levels of consciousness. The various levels of mind must not appear as levels, they must appear as a seamless process, whereby we can move from one vibratory focus to another with great ease and without interruption. He really veils what Sanat Kumara is. Sometimes he says, well, he's the soul of the planetary logos, or the soul-infused personality of the planetary logos. I'm trying to remember whether he says he's ever the personality of the planetary logos, but if so, it would not be in the usual sense of personality. And sometimes Sanat Kumara is simply considered to be the planetary logos himself. Well, emanation theory is needed here if we're going to understand how these things really work. There's a Buddhist, or is it a Tibetan book, or at least written by a man who had a lot to do, a Westerner, with Tibet. Was it Evans Wentz? And he wrote of multi-dimensional consciousness. And I assume, without a shifting of gears, I assume simultaneously this multi-dimensional consciousness could occur. Can we be mental and intuitive at the same time? I think so. Can we have feelings and a sense of attraction or repulsion at the same time? Can we be etherically living at the same time as we're having all these other states impinging upon our consciousness? Then that would be multi-dimensional consciousness. And of course, the higher the initiate, the easier it is to have that kind of state, or to support that kind of state. We can simply practice. I mean, I don't think any one of us is involved in just one state of consciousness at a time. We're having, for instance, with Kamamanas, although it can be an undesirable condition, we are feeling and thinking at the same time. Maybe both are compromised somehow. Carl Jung, I think, called these feeling-toned thoughts. They're occurring simultaneously. So I don't think we are necessarily isolated to only one level of input and response to that level. Okay, so this is the thing that we have to understand. This kind of omnipresence of Sanat Kumara, and the applying omnipresence of the initiative lesser degree, who is learning, slowly to be as Sanat Kumara is. The eternal youth can be seen by those who have the right. You'd have to be quite careful because, the face-to-face seeing of the eternal youth, I think only begins at the fifth initiation. Before that, it would probably be deadly to the form. By those who have the right, presiding, for instance, he can be seen presiding over the council in Shambhala, yet at the same time he is present as the life and informing intelligence upon and within our planet. Well, for instance, there is a Shambhala which is etheric, and it's sometimes associated with the Gobi Desert, and it's called the White Island. But there is the Shambhala of the cosmic ethers, and especially of the highest of the cosmic ethers, where the council is found, the council chamber. And Sanat Kumara is present in both. So we have to learn this kind of principle of ubiquity, and that we are not necessarily, once we become really initiates, sealed off from the dimensions which we have already conquered. They are somehow included in the highest dimension of which we are capable, or in relation to which we are capable of receiving impression. Well, I'll just take a short little break here. We're about an hour into it. And I will, try to continue. So let us go on here. You have, therefore, 5 points where the externalization of the ashrams will take place and eventually be focused. All right. From these points, as time elapses, other ashrams subsidiary in nature will be found emerging, sponsored and founded by disciples and initiates from the 5 ashrams and representing the 3 major rays and 2 minor rays. Right, well, this is telling us something important about the externalization process, its timing, the origin of the various ashrams. Other ashram subsidiary, and we've learned about the something about the subsidiary ashrams until there are 49 as a whole. But we must not, in our minds, rush the process, but be cautious in terms of what we observe and how we can then participate. I think is probably something that many of us will be participating in lives to come. To start with, they will be founded through the presence in these localities of some senior or world disciple. Maybe a senior disciple is something less than a world disciple. Sometimes it is said that a world disciple is an initiate of the 3rd degree, but not always, sometimes of the 2nd degree. A senior disciple would have to be at least an initiate of the 2nd degree. It must be remembered that the forerunner of all movements which appear the forerunner of all movements which appear upon the physical plane is an educational propaganda, propagation of ideas. Therefore, some disciple on the 2nd ray will come into action first of all in all these 5 points, and he will be followed by a disciple upon the 7th ray. This is this is specific and important. So, all right. I want to, in appropriate colors when I can, indicate this. And he will be followed by a disciple on the 7th ray, I suppose, to bring the presented thoughts into a state of correct organization and application. All world movements are, as you well know, externalizations of subjective ideas and concepts and of phases of formulated thinking. And the appearance of the hierarchy upon earth in tangible form is no exception to this rule. So the thought becomes the thing. And the thought must be well organized upon the interior planes. The society of organized and illumined minds. This is a name for hierarchy, and they work first on the subtle planes and then bring their formulations into manifestation. All right. Well, it's giving us a clear idea of how this will happen. And in the times ahead, how we might be cooperating and even now begin to prepare ourselves for cooperation. Disciples in these ashrams have been training for nearly 150 years to do this work. Whew. So that's about from the year 1800. Some have managed to keep the originating idea and impulse clear and untainted by their own thinking, and have adhered, even in their own intimate thoughts, to the hierarchical program as presented to them by their masters or the senior initiates, fourth degree, let's say, and others have not possessed so clear a reasoning faculty or so active an intuitive perception, and whilst grasping certain major concepts such as world unity or hierarchical gradations and control, have distorted the truth and produced the many ideologies which have wrecked the world during the past century. Well, we know less on the outer planes than we do when we are in full consciousness on the inner planes. And distortion happens. But ever since 1800, and it's interesting, not long after the coming in of the fifth ray, this being written just before 1950, and subtract 150 years, you get 1800, which is kind of the midway point between 1775 and 1825, when a major shambolic impact occurred. So, may we learn how to keep the impulse clear. May we learn how to, even in our own intimate thoughts, adhere to the plan as we have known it interiorly, and not fall into narrowness or distortion. Even this distortion is, however, being turned to good, for it produced a redoubled effort on the part of hierarchy to offset it. It led to an increased forcing process by means of which many earnest and willing aspirants reached the grade of accepted disciple. It produced also a ferment of thought in the world, which has served to awaken the mentality of the masses to possibilities and to horizons hitherto only visioned by the advanced and initiate thinkers. So evil has been turned into good, and a compromised situation into a much more beneficial situation. It's amazing how hierarchy and their leader, in a way, Sanat Kumara, can turn the evil tendencies to good. The Solar Logos has the Black Lodge figured into its plans. This is not the case for the planetary logos, yet on a subsidiary scale. Evil, whether of ignorance or deliberate evil, can be turned to good. And we are, even now part of this forcing process. And what is said here may be true of some of us. Maybe we don't know for sure where we've been immediately in the past, but probably we've been part of this forcing process and have benefited from it. So again, the hierarchy adapts and does those things which increase the possibility of humanity's welfare. Even now, the ferment of thought is active, and contradictory ideals are very present, and on the subtle planes, a kind of contention is going on between them. Basically, do they lead backwards or do they lead forwards? And those who adhere to that which is regressive don't really know that that's what they're doing, because they are younger in their soul experience. But we cannot become proud in identifying what we consider to be younger, because we might make an error. Okay, well, more about the man in the street, the average human being. The man in the street today has absorbed ideologies to an unforeseen extent, and the attempt to make him an active factor in our modern civilization is not too harmful in view of the time element as divinely conceived, and from the point of view of the staunch and basic integrity of the divine human being. So the man in the street is being employed, being utilized, and maybe ahead of the time when hierarchy thought that might be possible. In other words, we have the spread of education far more extensively than may have been anticipated. Now with the computer revolution, was it foreseen at this time? Probably by some. Now with the computer revolution, what is it said? That you won't have to travel but 5 or 6 miles between stations where computers will be available to people to enhance their learning process. Already you can see that the usual idea of physically going away to college may be challenged. I don't know whether the social implications of that are all good, but it is possible to learn via the computer and learn a lot. And the expense, of course, which rests so heavily upon various families, will no longer be such a burden. So many changes can be anticipated. Time and divinity. Well, DK says, look, the human being has integrity, basically. The divine human being has integrity. So to make the man in the street an active factor is now foreseen as possible. Time and divinity, events and instinctual goodness will in the long run triumph. The intermediate agonies and distressing but not final, and they are not triumphant from the angle of the dark forces. These forces face, as a result of the war and of the resurrecting human spirit, a vista of nearing and inevitable defeat. Of course, the time equation, DK is necessarily vague on that because so much depends on what humanity will do. The opportunity for us human beings to make our own decisions and abide by them is not to be taken away. So we do have much of the timing element in our hands. But let's just say the forces of darkness have not been triumphant. And so this is right after the war, and let us hope that this is the case as well. Now the danger of weaponry is much greater than maybe when he was writing, okay, and it could get worse and worse. I think that was one of the reasons that concentration upon the fifth ray ashram was alleviated, suspended for 50 years, something like that. From 1950 to the year 2000, I seem to gather. Who knows what capacity for destruction that ashram, under wrong guidance or affecting wrongly guided human personalities on the fifth ray, could have engineered. Already, the centers in London and in New York are showing signs of life, and disciples are active in both places and along all lines of human expression. The center in Geneva is also active, but not so thoroughly and inclusively. It waits for a greater calm and a firmer sense of security in Europe, which, maybe the European Union has provided or was to have provided. We'll have to see about the success of that union. It sounds like an idea fostered by Master R, who is the regent of both Europe and the United States. But at least London and New York, two second-ray centers, as we might expect, are the most active. From the planetary center point of view, London is considered a first-ray center and New York a sixth-ray center, but New York is a second-ray soul, and the United Kingdom is a second-ray soul, which includes, of course, England and London. So in those places where the second ray is prominent, early emergence occurs. We notice that in the five specialized groups, or the five energies or the five ashrams active initially, the second ray energy or ashram is always listed first, even though it may be a while before the Chohan of that ashram actually appears. In this case, Master KH. There's quite a complexity of energies with which we have to deal, and we have to study them closely to see what their interplay really is. But we can do that and at least come up with some reasonable ideas. But the signs of life in New York and in London have increased significantly, one would think, over the last 70 years or so. The center in Darjeeling is what is termed occultly vibrating, but this is in response to the relative nearness and propinquity of the Himalayan Brotherhood. Whilst in Tokyo there is small activity as yet, well, right after the war, so much recovery needed, and much recovery accomplished. And what there is of no great moment. Well, that is the year 1949. So the nearness, Darjeeling also as a city has the second ray and the fifth ray, very luminous, but it is a major first ray center. And then with Tokyo, not much, but the work at this center will actually be brought into being through the work of the triangles. By that, I do not mean that it will be a center of the triangle work, but that the concentrated meditative activity of the people engaged in the triangle activities will magnetically draw out that which must appear when a center is organized. So the triangle work is helping Tokyo emerge as a center. They are, these workers in triangles, in fact, creating the needed atmosphere, and that is ever a preliminary step. Once the atmosphere or the air in which to breathe and move is existent, then, that sounds like a Buddhic reference, then the living form can appear. So not so much yet in Tokyo, but that was 70 years ago, and let's see, it has become a thriving metropolis and is extremely active on the world stage. It has its own problems, of course. So the work of triangles is essential. As he says, it is work that must go on. And we can see that this particular planetary center is dependent to a degree on that work. So this is important because sometimes people interpret it differently. He says, I do not mean that it will be a center of the triangle work, but that the concentrated meditative activity of the people engaged in the triangle activities will magnetically draw out that which must appear when a center is organized. So let's read carefully, as he always advises us. He says you just don't read with sufficient close attention, and you miss much, of course. I'm always finding how much I miss by having maybe in the past read something in a perfunctory manner, although it's hard to read Master DK in a perfunctory manner. It does draw you in. It does arrest your attention. Objectively, therefore, the second ray work of teaching is the first to be organized. Subjectively, the first ray workers are already active, for the work of the first ray with its disturbing and destroying activity prepares the way. Pain and disruption ever precede birth, and the agents of the first ray have been working for nearly 200 years. That would take us back to 1750, And does he possibly mean 1775 when the fifth ray was coming in, or does he refer to some other cycle? The 100-year cycle, 1,000-year cycle, etc., are related to the first ray. So second ray, first. And he seems to be discussing certain ray cycles of which we have no idea and which are not much mentioned. Not much mentioned in his discussion of ray cycles. 200 years before he's writing here would definitely have been 1750. Now, do we know of any ray cycle beginning in 1750? It would be 16, 17, and 50, it would be 275 years from the beginning of the second ray cycle. And it would be 75 years. Well, wait a second. Maybe not. Yeah, we have to go all the way to let's say 1950. So 1950, we have the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 375 years. So it doesn't really work out from the second ray point of view. But maybe there's something else, that is involved here, cycles about which we don't yet know anything. DK seems to be hinting at those, when he makes a remark like this, which indicates something apparently new. The agents of the second ray started their preparation around the year 1825 and moved outward in force soon after 1860. Well, okay, that would be 35 years or half of a 70-year cycle, which corresponds to the seventh ray. From that date on, great concepts and new ideas and modern ideologies and arguments for and against aspects of the truth have characterized modern thought and produced the present mental chaos and the many conflicting schools and ideologies with their attendant movements and organizations. Out of all these, order and truth and the new civilization will emerge. The order part, ray 7, the truth part, ray 2, ray 3. So this is an interesting cycle that features the appearing of the second ray, but remember, it's also a year of the shambolic impact, a powerful one. And so the first ray and the second ray are striking at the same time. So greater externalization after 1860, but then remember too, the movement of blood and iron under Bismarck in Germany, which brought in a whole materialistic stream leading to the Great War, among other things. Well, anyway, we have a very unsettled condition, at least we did at that time. And I cannot say that the condition of human thought at this time is settled. It still is filled with confusion and conflicting ideologies, even in those organizations which are meant to be unified. I mean, right within the European Union, there are a number of different approaches, and some of them quite contradictory to each other, some quite autocratic even, others more democratic. And even within the United Kingdom itself, there are different points of view between England and Scotland and Northern Ireland. And then, of course, if we consider the Southern Ireland, it's a member of the European Union. It's not a member of the United Kingdom, but it's geographically related very closely to the United Kingdom. And there are just such differing points of view, a chaos of contending thought. But the major hope and necessity is that democracy of an ever more authentic kind would emerge, and that the education will educate the masses so that when they exercise their democratic rights, they will not be swept thoughtlessly by demagogues and others who speak to their not yet redeemed negative emotions. Of course, we all have negative emotions, but the more advanced people can recognize from the mental perspective that this is the case, and others are simply swept by the demagogue and produce some very self-defeating, unintelligent behavior. So out of all of this, out of all these, order and truth and a new civilization will arise. Truth, of course, is much connected with the fifth ray also, which is the major ray coming through the Aquarian constellation and sign. The seventh ray is there as an accompanying cycle. Seventh ray bringing order and renewal in general is the quality of Aquarius. Is somehow an ability to contact, maybe via Uranus, the archetypes which, when their power descends, bring what appears as renewal, even though they have been there from the beginning. This civilization, says the Tibetan, will emerge as a result of mass thinking. No, we see some of this happening. It will no longer be a civilization imposed by an oligarchy of any kind, those in power because largely of financial resources, an elite that determines what the masses must do, for good or for ill. This will be a new phenomenon, and one for which the hierarchy has had to wait prior to reappearing. Had the hierarchy come before this era of thought and of mass discussion and the fight to further creative ideas, the tenets and the truths for which the hierarchy stands could be regarded as being also imposed upon humanity and therefore infringing human freedom. Well, maybe for the sake of the power of the thinking of the masses, I will use the green color. I tend to use it for things related to the human personality, to the masses, also to financial issues, and so forth. there's no real consistency that is possible here in the use of these colors, but at least it tends to mark out certain areas of discussion. So the basic principle here, hierarchy may not impose upon the human will even good solutions. It can suggest, it can teach, it can induce, lead towards, present a vision, persuade. It can do all those things. It just cannot violate the will of those even who are about to make poor decisions. And in that respect is very different from the way the Black Lodge operates. So the time has come, let's just say, the thinking man is emerging, and emerging from the masses of people, of the people. As education pursues its benevolent purpose. No. That's because it says finish. Okay. Purposes. Let's see here. Yeah, successfully. Now, this will not now be the case, he says, and the hierarchy will come forth into exoteric manifestation because humanity has, of its own free will, developed a quality analogous to that of the hierarchy and therefore magnetic to that spiritual organization. Goodwill will draw forth from its holy secret hiding place. Is that, the Buddhic plane, perhaps, where the majority of ashrams are found? From its holy secret hiding place, the exponents of love. And thus the new world will come into being. So it will not be the case that imposition will happen. Imposition will not happen. And let's see here. Okay. This is a good thing, because hierarchy has certain rules by which it works. It must be very painful psychologically, and DK says it is, for hierarchy to watch humanity making poor decisions or to be teetering on the edge of really poor decisions which will delay an emergence into greater light. It is a sad thing and causes to them a kind of exquisite agony. DK talks about, you imagine us to be safe in our retreats, but we look on, agonized at the kinds of decisions you tend to make and or are about to make. So now about subsidiary ashrams. These subsidiary ashrams are already being attempted in various parts of the world. It is necessary for you to remember that the members of these ashrams will not all be on the teaching line, but will be composed of disciples on many rays, upon many rays. The attempt to form coherent and integrated ashrams is based upon the recognition of the initial difficulty of the various ray aspirants to comprehend each other's point of view and mode of working, and to think in the many differing terms and modes of thought. Well, maybe we have such a difficulty. Maybe we can understand much going on from the second ray perspective, because most of us adhering to DK's teaching find ourselves with a strong second ray somehow. But when it comes to first ray approaches, fifth ray approaches, seventh ray approaches, third ray approaches, do we really have sympathy with them? Do we understand them? And sometimes only with difficulty. I sometimes watch the many financial manipulations which are occurring, and I wonder, which of them are honest and productive, really necessary, and which are simply intended to promote political idealism, or at least ideology, perhaps is a better term, because idealism seems to suggest the good, and much of what is being promoted is simply a narrow ideological point of view. So there are, however, three fundamental requirements which must condition and color all the ashrams, no matter on what the ray. So, our task, of course, is to recognize how other workers work, and because of the formation of the new group of world servers, that has become easier to do, because there are fewer barriers now, and there are disciples on various rays on loan to ashrams which are not their ray at all. The first ray disciples on loan to the second ray ashram. When I asked Daniel Enton, director of Agni Yoga Society for so many years, he seemed to think he was on the second ray. Was he correct, not correct? I mean, it's always hard for us to know whether even when we are correct or incorrect, but that was his impression. So some presence there, not only of first-ray types. I did meet a person in Agni Yoga, long established, and a friend of Madame Rurik. She was so staunchly first ray, there was no gainsaying it. But Daniel, working so excellently for many years, did have very strong second-rate qualities. So we're on loan to each other, and maybe certain educators are distributed through many ashrams, as education must precede the externalizing work of any ashram. What's it for? How can people help? So they promote that aspect of the divine plan and do not resist it. Three fundamental requirements which must condition all ashrams regardless of the ray. And what are they? Let's see. an internal group unity conducive to a synthesis of understanding between the various ashrams. There springs out of a unified group objective a sense of loyalty to the hierarchy and a uniformly disciplined life. I said uniform, brother of mine, for the discipline is that of spiritual inclination and an inspired intention, which produces a similarity in the livingness of the units in the ashram. This is, of course, diversified by the ray quality of the aspirants and disciples, and by personality tradition. Ponder on those last two words. Personality, tradition, long-standing habit, nature may be cultivated over many lives, and difficult to break, even if the soul would incline towards a more shared uniformity. So not only a synthesis of understanding within an ashram, which is obviously much needed, but between the ashrams. An internal group unity conducive to a synthesis of understanding between the various ashrams. More and more we need this. All right. I'll kind of, use a color here that I'm associating with manifestation. A uniformly disciplined life. I mean, in an ashram, we tend to see things from a certain point of view and understand each other because we share a certain point of view. Personality tradition can get in the way and be disruptive, but if we manage soul contact, then there will be a greater unity and uniformity. Okay, here is similarity of objective. And by that I mean an apprehension and appreciation of the hierarchical plan and of the contribution each ashram has to make for its materialization on earth. To this must be added an united ashramic similarity of instinctual and intuitive telepathic rapport with the senior members of the ashram, the masters and initiates of high degree, and through them with the Christ. So this has to do pretty much with the internal features, processes within the ashram. So here we learn up here. Okay, whoops. Here we learn of inter-ashramic relations and inter-ashramic. And here we learn of intra-ashramic relations. So this interesting instinctual and intuitive telepathic rapport So we definitely in an ashram are very sensitive to the thought and direction of the leaders and guides of the ashram. Similarity of objective. Within the ashram, all ashramic work being based on these three things. I would here call to your attention that the mental inclination of all the esotericists in the world for the past 100 years, 1850, has been directed towards individual rapport with the master, and this because of the necessity of discovering the ashram with which the aspirant must make contact. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing, or just a necessary thing? This attitude has now widened in its approach mentally by the many diversified disciples in the many ashrams into a group movement. You know, this is more the new group of world servers movement, or a group inclination towards the Christ, not just towards one's own master. A group inclination towards the Christ, the major and most important factor in the implementation of the hierarchical plan. This mental approach is not the same thing as constant aspirational preoccupation of the earnest Christian follower with the thought of Christ. It is something quite different. We're really learning something about what the great Lord really wants, what he thinks, what is the mind as it is in Christ. It is the type of teaching that has moved beyond the Orthodox Christian teaching. So there has been progress in that regard. Now, what are we looking at here in general? We're looking at three fundamental requirements which condition and color all ashrams, no matter what the ray. You know, sometimes we get into a list and we forget what propelled the list to be made. Okay. Okay, going on now. So now there is a difference in approach. It's towards the Christ. It's towards maybe the hierarchy as a whole. Now that many people have established who their master is and what ashram, ray ashram, or even subsidiary ashram they are involved with. It is a unified group endeavor, says the Tibetan, generated in each ashram and fostered by all alike to bring the entire group as a band of world servers into the aura of the currents of the Christ as he formulates his ideas, creates the thought form needed prior to manifestation, and makes his arrangements for his reappearing. Okay, so we've moved forward. There is progress here in relation to the Christ, as now there is greater certainty among the disciples as to the ashram to which they belong. This is not the same thing as establishing a telepathic rapport between an individual disciple and the Christ, for that is not needed or desirable. I think, the group approach is what is needed. The unity of aim, the desire to serve, the recognition of the present focused intention of the hierarchy under the guidance of the Christ become an invocative, magnetic state of group consciousness. This evokes from the Christ and his informed masters an identification of their united thought with the group aspiration. So it is all done, this advancement, this elevation, this drawing forward and drawing upward, through a group dynamic. This is the higher spiritual correspondence of what is called in the three worlds, Kama Manus. Very interesting. Kama Manus can be used for the good, or sometimes it is a limitation, but it involves thought and feeling aspiration at the same time. The Christ is more sensitive to the group vibration. He once asked the Tibetan, what is this group that is interesting itself in our work? Well, that was when the Arcane School had taken up the study of the problems of humanity. It was a group phenomenon that was noticed by the Christ. So there has been progress, and we're no longer dealing exactly with the extremely focused attention upon the master. The mental inclination for the past 150 years has been directed towards individual rapport with the master. Now, the group attention is directed towards the Christ and his hierarchy. So the many different disciples have been organized or found themselves part of a group movement towards a group inclination towards the Christ. Okay. This is not, I realize, an easy thing to understand when divorced from the usual Christian concept of the relation of Christ to the inner aspirant. One might almost say the inner Christ is the soul, and there, of course, the relationship to the personality is pursued. The idea may perhaps be clarified for you by reminding yourselves that some of you who read these words know me and have found your way into my ashram under the guidance of your own soul and my ready reception. Others all over the world, through their spiritual intuition and their desire to serve and to know, have brought into their recognized area of consciousness, as there are also the unrecognized areas, the teaching which is given in my books. Their relation to me is symbolic of the type of relation which disciples and aspirants can and do established with the Christ. Though the analogy is far from perfect, it is possible to recognize the correspondence in its many gradations and reciprocal sensitivity. Not easy, what he's just written, not easy. And so requires our pondering. This is not to say that one may not have, when a senior, well, when an initiate of the threshold, some kind of relation with the Christ. He is, after all, the initiator. But that kind of aspirational longing to be related to the Christ directly and singly, DK says, is not desirable, and it's not the way at this time for the normal disciple. So there are direct modes of relationship. DK gives an analogy. Those who actually know him, I suppose, oftentimes from the past, teaching relations, family relations, and thus have found their way into his ashram as the soul has guided. Others, because they seek or have sought to know and have sought to activate their spiritual intuition, have brought DK's teaching into their recognized area of consciousness. Which are we? Sometimes it's difficult to know, and the factor of, forgetfulness of previous lives complicates the issue. Now, one more thing here, point number 3 of the 3 fundamental requirements which must condition and color all the ashrams, no matter what the ray may be. Point number 3. All right, let's see if we can get that. And it is a fundamental and basic similarity of sympathetic response by the units in all ashrams to the needs of humanity, to the quality of the program for their development which the objective demands, and to the nature of the goodwill and understanding, intelligently applied. All these qualities are not handicapped by undue emotional sensitivity. So this is being shared by the members in all ashrams and by the many ashrams with their members that are oriented towards the Christ. A fundamental and basic similarity of sympathetic response by the units in all ashrams to the needs of humanity, to the quality of the program for their development which the objective demands, and to the nature of goodwill and understanding, intelligently applied. All of these are necessary. So it's an orientation towards humanity. What we've seen now is an orientation towards the master. We've seen an orientation towards the Christ. And number one, we've seen that internal group unity conducive to an understanding between the various ashrams. In other words, not an isolative activity at all, but one which begins to take in a positive way, an understanding of the other ashrams, regardless of whether the understanding is as complete, which it cannot be, as the understanding of the work of one's own ashram, but still an openness. Now, we recall that in the beginning, the ray types really don't understand each other very well and can be quite hostile towards each other. We've seen that when comparing the sixth ray to the fifth, having no use for science, or the fifth ray having no use for belief, or the war between the sixth ray and the seventh ray, the various nature religions and the possibility of magical work considered satanic or devilish or whatever by the sixth ray type. I mean, when they close something out, they really close it out and do not give it credit for being of value. But all of that ends eventually as the ray types climb the mountain of illumination. So the third point then, a basic similarity of sympathetic response to the needs of humanity. By the units in all ashrams, they are oriented towards meeting human need and the necessities of human development. These three conditions, says the Tibetan, will be found in all the ashrams and will unite the members within any ashram to those in other ashrams in a measure or rhythm of telepathic relation. Okay. So greater and greater inclusiveness occur. And one may find oneself with a deep appreciation for what is accomplished in ashrams other than one's own, and to see how that type of accomplishment facilitates accomplishment within one's own ashram. So, similarity of objective, number 2, and orientation towards humanity and its service, number 3, and inter-ashramic rapport, number 1. We ask ourselves, to what extent is human need burning within us? The consciousness of human need, to what extent? And I think the farther we go, the more it burns, because we do see others suffering as we have suffered or will suffer. And we develop an identification with them as if they were ourselves, which they are. From this unified and central position, a rapidly deepening telepathic relation will inevitably be established and sustained by the group, with the ashram and with the Christ on the one hand and with humanity on the other. So we'll be looking in both directions towards hierarchy and humanity, even as hierarchy looks towards Shambhala and towards humanity. and with humanity on the other. With this as a foundational and conditioning quality, the work can proceed as required. There's no way that this work can be done in line with the plan without a deep group orientation towards the hierarchy and the Christ, and a deeply serviceable, helpful orientation towards humanity. I'm speaking for disciples here. You will note therefore, why I have so consistently emphasized during the past 30 years of teaching. Remember, November 19th, 1919. Here we are in September 1949. The necessity for the development of a truly spiritual and psychic sensitivity, not an obstructive psychic sensitivity or emotionalism, as may be found in the still ignorant psychic, plus the unfoldment of the faculty of scientific telepathic rapport. He was teaching his groups how to be sensitive in this way, but basically said, we are already sensitive. It's just a question of removing the obstacles. I have thereby laid the foundation of the science of impression with the illumined and rightly oriented mind as the interpreter, the analyzer, and the transmitter. Now, in the book Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle, we will have much of what is needed to expand upon what he's just said here. So ever more inclusive, ever more sensitive, ever more accepting of other values, which may not be the values upon which we are most focused, but are values of great necessity, assisting our work with our particular task. This the Tibetan is encouraging in us, and this he is helping us to achieve. Well, we've gone on for maybe, 2 hours and 20 minutes. We're on page 682, and this is pretty close to the end if it ends at 7:01, because the book ends at 7:01. So the question is this the last chapter in the book? Then back to the seed groups, wishing I had already, nope, not quite. The work of the externalized ashrams, okay. It's not given a date, and it's short, basically. And it ends on page 701. Okay. So this is page 682. Whoops. Let's get that correct. I see what the problem is. I've got two different keyboards. One of them is a Finnish keyboard and the other an English keyboard. So let's see if I can do this properly. I'm not doing too well here. A bunch of question marks are appearing before my eyes. I see. Well, let's see if I can change this to the English keyboard and possibly get what I'm looking for. Yep, well, I did it. All right, now we go back to the page on which we began. Maybe this little bit of housekeeping isn't too interesting to you, I can imagine. But it's kind of necessary. It's number 90. Okay, so we went to 682. And our date here that we've been working with is the 22nd. As I say, it's been quite a weekend with the solstice, the eclipse, the new moon, the political demonstrations. Have been such a turmoil, at least in the United States. And of course, so often what starts in the United States tends to have a ripple effect. So this will be the end then of number 90. And it's approximately 2 hours and 30 minutes, or maybe a little less. So this has gone to 682. And our next program will be program number 91. We're getting near the end here. And it's difficult to know 22 when that will be. Probably not tonight. Although I wish I could just be, like the Energizer Bunny and keep going here, but not always possible. Here is, we'll begin with 682 and go forward. All right, friends. Appreciate your presence, and I hope we're all getting something out of this that will help us work during the next 5 years as maybe never before, because things are going to intensify between the two types of forces, one of them working for retrogression or maybe the status quo, in the worst case for retrogression, and the other working for progression and the preparation for the real entrance into the age of Aquarius. So, lots of love, many blessings. Study hard. I guess if you listen to these videos, it's like study, isn't it? And meditate deeply, and, well, we continue the service that we can, for which we are best suited, or that which is most needed. I'll see you soon.